The massive alien vessel appeared without warning on a Tuesday afternoon, positioning itself in geosynchronous orbit above the United Nations headquarters in New York. It hung in the sky like a colossal metal avocado with questionable design choices, covered in what appeared to be the extraterrestrial equivalent of bumper stickers. Earth responded with its usual grace: mass panic, emergency broadcasts, and politicians trying desperately to look like they had a plan for this exact situation. They didn't. Jack Murphy, Earth's hastily appointed interstellar diplomacy specialist, stood in the UN's largest conference room, straightening his tie for the 14th time. Jack had been selected for 3 key qualifications: a PhD in xenolinguistics, a background in international negotiation, and most importantly, he happened to be in the building when the aliens called. "Dana, give me a confidence boost," Jack whispered to the small earpiece containing his AI assistant. "You look like you slept in that suit. Your hair is doing that weird thing again, and you've got spinach in your teeth from lunch," replied the pleasantly modulated voice of Dana, digital analytical negotiation assistant. "That's not a confidence boost. You didn't program me for lies, Jack. You programmed me for optimal outcomes. Statistically, you perform 23% better when slightly annoyed." Jack sighed. "Any last-minute advice before our visitors arrive?" "Don't mention their resemblance to anything from Earth. The last diplomat who told an alien they looked like a cute koala ended up as the centerpiece of an interplanetary incident that—" The massive doors swung open. In walked, or rather, undulated 3 aliens. The lead creature resembled a cross between an octopus and a chandelier, with iridescent tentacles and what might have been eyes scattered across its upper hemisphere. The 2 flanking it were smaller, with more subdued coloration. "Greetings." Earth representative, the lead alien's voice emanated from a translator device. "I am Grand Envoy Krell of the Galactic Consortium. We come in peace and with an offer of protection." Jack stepped forward with practiced diplomatic calm. "Welcome to Earth, Grand Envoy Krell. I'm Jack Murphy, representing the United Nations of Earth. We're honored by your visit and interested in your offer, though I admit we're curious about what exactly we need protection from." The alien's tentacles rippled in what Dana's quick analysis suggested was either amusement or indigestion. "All developing worlds require protection as they emerge into the greater galactic community," Krell stated, as if this explained everything. "The consortium offers this protection in exchange for a modest contribution of resources." Jack raised an eyebrow. "Resources? Nothing excessive. Merely 30% of your planet's water, 25% of your rare minerals, and exclusive mining rights to your moon." Krell's tentacles wiggled in what Jack assumed was the alien equivalent of a reassuring smile. Jack felt Dana vibrate against his ear. "Classic protection racket," she whispered. "They're essentially cosmic gangsters saying, 'Nice planet you got here. Shame if something happened to it.'" "Grand Envoy," Jack said carefully, "while we appreciate your generous offer, Earth has managed quite well without external protection for its entire history. Perhaps you could clarify what specific threats we need protection from." The alien's body pulsed with colors that Jack's cultural sensitivity training had not prepared him for. The 2 smaller aliens exchanged glances, or what passed for glances when you have optical organs distributed across your entire body. "The dangers of interstellar existence are numerous and complex," Krell replied, somehow managing to sound both condescending and evasive simultaneously. "I'm sure they are." Jack smiled, channeling his inner poker player, "but we humans are very detail-oriented. So before we hand over a quarter of our planet's resources, we'd appreciate knowing exactly what we're being protected from. Hostile aliens? Space pirates? Cosmic tax auditors? Help us understand." A tense silence filled the room. Krell's tentacles twisted in what Dana's analysis identified as extreme discomfort with a hint of panic. "This is not how these negotiations typically proceed," Krell finally said. "Welcome to Earth," Jack replied with a shrug. "We're not typical. Now, about those threats." One of the smaller aliens leaned over and whispered something to Krell, who responded with what sounded like gargled marbles run through a blender. "Very well," Krell composed himself, his colors shifting to a more formal pattern. "If you insist on specifics, we will reconvene tomorrow with a full briefing on galactic threats. But be warned, human Jack Murphy, the knowledge we share may disturb your primitive sensibilities." As the aliens undulated out of the room, Dana whispered, Did an alien just come back with a warrant us? Jack nodded, loosening his tie. Something tells me, Dana, that our friends don't actually have a warrant. And I'm betting whatever threat they come up with tomorrow is going to be very interesting indeed. $10 says it's Space Dragons Dan equipped. 20 says it's protection from the Galactic Consortium itself, Jack countered, watching the door close behind the aliens. Either way, tomorrow should be enlightening. The next morning, Jack arrived at the UN building wearing a marginally better suit and carrying enough coffee to fuel a small army or one sleep-deprived diplomat. How do I look today, Dana, he asked, adjusting his tie in the elevator mirror. Like someone who stayed up all night researching every known protection racket in human history, Dana replied. Your eye bags have eye bags. That's because I did exactly that. And do you know what I learned? That humans have been scamming other humans since the dawn of time, and aliens are just catching up to the trend. Precisely, Jack nodded, stepping out of the elevator. If these aliens are running a protection racket, they're following a script as old as civilization. The trick is figuring out their angle. The conference room had been redesigned overnight to accommodate the aliens' physiological needs, which apparently included higher humidity and lower chairs. The human delegation had expanded as well, now including General Laura Hayes of the Global Defense Force, Dr. Olivia Washington, Earth's foremost xenobiologist, and Theo Nakamura, a quantum engineer who specialized in theoretical alien tech. Jack nodded to his colleagues. Remember, let me do the talking unless I specifically bring you in. Murphy, General Hayes grumbled. If these squid chandeliers threaten Earth, diplomatic protocol goes out the window. Noted, General. But let's try not to start an interspecies incident before lunch. The doors swung open, and the alien delegation entered, this time with 5 members. Grand Envoy Krell led the procession, followed by the same 2 aides and 2 new aliens wearing what appeared to be the extraterrestrial equivalent of PowerPoint presenters. Greetings. Expanded Earth Delegation Krell undulated formally. As promised, we have prepared a comprehensive briefing on the threats facing your world. We appreciate your thoroughness, Jack replied with practiced diplomacy. We're eager to understand these dangers. One of the new aliens moved forward, activating a holographic display that materialized in the center of the room. This, it announced with dramatic flair, is the Xorblatt. The hologram showed what appeared to be a space rabbit, a blue, slightly fuzzy creature approximately the size of a large dog, with long ears and 6 eyes arranged in a circle. Jack waited for more information. When none came, he cleared his throat. I see. And the Xorblatt threatens Earth how? Exactly. The alien presenter looked at Krell, who gestured for it to continue. The Xorblatt is an invasive species known for its rapid reproduction and consumption of vegetative matter. Dr. Washington leaned forward, scientific curiosity piqued. So it's essentially a space rabbit that eats plants. Not just any plants, the presenter corrected with grave seriousness. The Xorblatt has evolved to specifically enjoy the taste of what you call broccoli and kale. General Hayes snorted coffee through her nose. Jack maintained his diplomatic composure, though it took considerable effort. So the threat you're offering to protect us from is a space rabbit that might eat our kale. You misunderstand, the severity, Krell interjected, tentacles waving agitatedly. The Xorblatt reproduces exponentially. A single mating pair can produce up to 50 offspring per Earth month. Like rabbits. Then Dr. Washington muttered. And their appetite is voracious, the presenter continued. They can strip an agricultural field in days. Earth has extensive experience with invasive species, Jack noted calmly. We have protocols for managing such threats that don't involve surrendering a quarter of our planetary resources. Krell's colors shifted to an anxious purple. The Xorblatt is merely one example. There are others. Please, continue, Jack gestured to the hologram. The presentation cycled through several more threats: space algae that might clog waterways, microscopic organisms that could potentially tarnish gold, and a type of cosmic dust that made technology run slightly slower. General Hayes leaned toward Jack. This is absurd. They're describing minor nuisances, not existential threats. Exactly, Jack whispered back. They're reaching for justifications. The final threat was a species called the gloombat, which emitted a low-frequency sound that could, according to the presenter, induce mild melancholy in sensitive individuals. When the presentation concluded, an uncomfortable silence filled the room. Jack took a slow sip of coffee, studying Krell and his increasingly nervous aides. "Thank you for this illuminating presentation," Jack finally said. "If I understand correctly, you're asking for 30% of Earth's water and 25% of our minerals to protect us from space rabbits, algae, dust, and mildly depressing bat calls. You trivialize genuine threats," protested one of Krell's aides, a smaller alien with anxious pink spots pulsing across its surface. "I am technical advisor, Vexor, and I assure you, these species have caused significant disruption on developing worlds." "I'm sure they have," Jack nodded seriously. "Just as I'm sure the Galactic Consortium's protection is effective. However, you must understand our perspective. These threats seem manageable with our existing technology and resources." "You underestimate," Vexor began, but Krell cut him off with a sharp tentacle gesture. "Perhaps we could offer protection from more substantial threats," Krell suggested smoothly. "The galaxy contains dangerous predatory species, spacefaring raiders, even hostile civilizations that might target resource-rich worlds like Earth." "Now we're getting somewhere," General Hayes muttered. "Such as," Jack prompted. Krell's tentacles twisted uncertainly. "Well, there's the Vexor, the briefing materials." The aide frantically consulted a device that resembled a glowing jellyfish. "We don't have that information readily available, Grand Envoy. The standard threat package was deemed sufficient for this negotiation." Jack exchanged glances with his team. Standard threat package. "A customary collection of known galactic hazards presented to emerging worlds," Krell explained, attempting to regain composure. "Updated quarterly by Consortium Risk Assessment." Dr. Washington couldn't contain herself. "You're using a standardized sales pitch, like a cosmic timeshare presentation." "I believe," Jack said, standing up, "that the human delegation needs to confer privately. Would you excuse us for a moment?" Once sequestered in an adjacent room, the humans let loose. "They're trying to scam us," General Hayes exclaimed. "This isn't diplomacy, it's a con job." "No kidding," Theo snorted. "Even my 6-year-old nephew could come up with scarier monsters than space bunnies." Dr. Washington was reviewing notes on her tablet. "The threats they described are mostly nuisances, not existential dangers. It's like offering hurricane insurance to a desert." Jack paced the room, deep in thought. "Dana, analysis." "They're hiding something," the AI replied. "The inconsistencies in their presentation, the nervousness of the aides, the standardized nature of their threats. Either they're running a galaxy-wide protection racket, or what Jack prompted. Or they're desperate for the resources and improvising badly," Dana concluded. "Their technology is advanced, but their negotiation tactics are amateur hour." Jack stopped pacing, a slow smile spreading across his face. "Which means we have leverage. I think it's time we turn the tables on our cosmic visitors." "What are you thinking?" General Hayes asked, recognizing the gleam in Jack's eye. "I'm thinking," Jack replied, "that if they want to play protector, we should let them on our terms. And I'm also thinking it's time we find out what these aliens are really after." When the human delegation returned to the conference room, Jack wore the expression of someone who had just figured out the magician's trick halfway through the show. Krell's tentacles twitched nervously as the humans took their seats with newfound confidence. After careful consideration, Jack announced, "Earth has decided to accept your generous offer of protection." Krell's body flashed with surprise, literally, as a wave of yellow bioluminescence rippled across his form. "You have, that is, excellent news. Most worlds require more convincing." "I bet they do," Jack smiled pleasantly. "However, we have some conditions." "Conditions," Vexor squeaked, his pink spots now pulsing rapidly. "Nothing excessive," Jack replied, deliberately echoing Krell's words from the previous day. "Simply matters of implementation and verification." General Hayes slid a tablet across the table. "Our terms." Krell reluctantly extended a tentacle to accept the device, his eyes scanning the document with increasing alarm. "These demands are unprecedented." "As is your protection racket," Jack replied, dropping the diplomatic facade. Let's cut to the chase, shall we? We know those threats are insignificant. What we don't know is why an advanced species is trying to scam a primitive world out of its resources. The alien delegation exchanged panicked glances. Krell's colors shifted through a spectrum that Dana quietly identified as "oh crap" in alien body language. I assure you, Earth representative, our intentions are. Save it, Jack interrupted. Instead of arguing, let me walk you through our terms. First, we want a complete technological exchange. If you're protecting us, we need to understand your capabilities. That would violate consortium protocols for developing worlds, Vexor protested. Second, Jack continued as if he hadn't heard. We want to inspect your vessel. If we're surrendering resources, we need to verify your capacity to provide the promised protection. Out of the question, another aide exclaimed. Third, Jack pressed on. We want a detailed census of all member species in this Galactic Consortium, including their resource requirements. We need to understand the broader context of this arrangement. Krell's tentacles were practically tied in knots. These demands are impossible. No world has ever. Final point, Jack smiled, leaning forward. We want a direct communication channel to your supervisors in the consortium hierarchy. The conference room fell silent. The aliens had gone completely still, their colors faded to a uniform gray that didn't require Dana's translation to interpret as dread. You see, Jack continued, his voice casual but firm, we've been doing some thinking. If these threats are so minor, why do you need our resources? And if there are genuine dangers out there, why send such an underprepared delegation with a laughable presentation? Dr. Washington chimed in. The biological threats you described could be contained with basic quarantine protocols. Nothing justifying the resource demands you've made. And Theo added, finally speaking up, the technical specifications you've provided for your protection technologies are vague to the point of meaninglessness. As an engineer, I find that suspicious. Krell's body deflated slightly. Perhaps we could negotiate a reduced resource package. Perhaps, Jack nodded. You could tell us what's really going on here. The aliens huddled together, tentacles intertwined in what appeared to be a heated discussion. Strange clicking and bubbling sounds emanated from their cluster, occasionally rising to volumes that suggested disagreement. Finally, Krell turned back to the humans. We would be willing to permit a limited inspection of our vessel under strict supervision. This would demonstrate our capabilities and good faith. Jack exchanged glances with his team. It was a concession, but not a full explanation. Still, it was progress. We accept, he replied. General Hayes, Dr. Washington, and Engineer Nakamura will conduct the inspection. I'll remain here to continue our diplomatic discussions. Acceptable, Krell agreed, though his coloration suggested it was anything but. Vexor will escort your team aboard our vessel immediately. As the inspection team prepared to depart, Jack pulled Theo aside. Look for anything unusual. Power systems, resource storage, defensive capabilities, anything that might explain what they really want. On it, Theo nodded. My guess? Their ship isn't what it appears to be. After the inspection team had departed with Vexor and another aide, Jack turned back to Krell, who remained with a single assistant. Now, Grand Envoy Jack smiled pleasantly, pouring 2 cups of coffee. While they're touring your vessel, perhaps we could speak more. Candidly. Krell's remaining aide quietly backed toward the door. I should assist with the inspection, it mumbled before making a hasty exit. Left alone with Jack, Krell's tentacles drooped in resignation. You are not like other emerging species we have encountered. So I gather, Jack replied, sliding 1 coffee cup toward the alien, who regarded it with confusion. It's just coffee. Non-toxic to your biology, according to our scans, though I can't promise it tastes good to your kind. Krell cautiously extended a tentacle, dipping it into the coffee. His upper body rippled. Bitter, but not unpleasant. Much like diplomatic relations, Jack observed. So, while our colleagues are occupied, why don't you tell me what's really happening here? No standard threat packages, no resource demands, just the truth. Krell's colors shifted to a deep blue that Dana identified as contemplative with notes of resignation. The consortium is not what it once was, Krell finally admitted. Resources are scarce in our region of space. Many worlds have been overtaxed. So you're strip mining the galaxy and calling it protection, Jack concluded. It is more complicated than that, Krell protested, but without much conviction. The consortium provided genuine security for centuries, but recent leadership changes have prioritized resource acquisition over mutual defense, and you got stuck with the job of shaking down Earth. Krell's tentacles twitched in what might have been a shrug. I was once a respected xenobiologist. Now I am this. A cosmic reaper man, Jack nodded sympathetically. But why Earth? We're hardly the most resource-rich planet in our own solar system, let alone the galaxy. Before Krell could answer, Jack's secure communicator buzzed. It was General Hayes. Murphy, you need to hear this, her voice crackled over the line. We found something. Unexpected. Jack glanced at Krell, whose colors had shifted to a guilty purple. Let me guess, Jack said to both Hayes and Krell. Our alien friends aren't quite what they appear to be. Not even close, Hayes replied. Get Nakamura on the line. He needs to explain what we're looking at. A moment later, Theo's excited voice came through the speaker. Jack, their ship isn't a diplomatic vessel. It's not even primarily a warship. It's a refugee transport that's been modified to look intimidating. Jack's eyes never left Krell, who had sunk lower in his seat, tentacles curled inward in what was unmistakably the universal body language of embarrassment. There are nearly 1,000 aliens on board, Dr. Washington added, her voice tinged with amazement. Families, children, elderly. This isn't a consortium delegation, it's a refugee crisis with a fancy paint job. Interesting, Jack said, studying Krell's deflating form. And their technology. Advanced in some areas, surprisingly primitive in others, Theo reported. Their propulsion and life support systems are impressive, but their weapons are practically decorative. They couldn't fight off an Earth mosquito, let alone provide protection to anyone. Jack nodded slowly, pieces falling into place. Thank you. Continue your inspection, but be respectful. These aren't conquerors, they're desperate people. He ended the call and turned back to Krell, who had transformed from an intimidating diplomatic envoy to a dejected, almost pitiful figure. So Jack said quietly, You're not here to protect Earth. You're running from something. And you need our resources not for some consortium, but for your own survival. Krell's colors faded to a dull gray. The shame is unbearable. Less shameful than continuing this charade, Jack pointed out. Now, why don't you tell me what you're really afraid of? What's out there that has a shipload of refugees posing as galactic protectors? Krell raised his eyes, or what passed for eyes, to meet Jack's gaze. We are not running from something, human Jack Murphy. We are running from someone, and that someone is you. Aboard the alien vessel, General Hayes, Dr. Washington, and Theo Nakamura were getting a guided tour that was quickly devolving into an interstellar version of Catch Me If You Can. And this Vexor announced with forced enthusiasm, gesturing to what appeared to be a janitor's closet, is our secondary tactical operations center. Theo raised an eyebrow. Really? Because it looks like a storage room for what I'm guessing is alien toilet paper. Multi-purpose design, Vexor insisted, his pink spots pulsing frantically. Efficient use of space is a consortium hallmark. General Hayes poked her head into the closet. And where are the tactical systems exactly? Classified, Vexor replied quickly. Moving on to our next area of interest. The alien hurried down the corridor, tentacles flailing in what Dr. Washington was beginning to recognize as pure anxiety. The human delegation exchanged knowing glances before following. Is it just me, Theo whispered, or does this ship look like it was decorated by someone who learned about intimidating space vessels from watching B-movies? It's not just you, Hayes confirmed. Those weapon turrets we passed earlier were made of painted cardboard. And did you notice, Dr. Washington added, that half the control panels aren't even connected to anything? They're just blinking lights behind glass. Their next stop was what Vexor proudly introduced as the primary defense grid control. Impressive, Theo nodded, examining what was clearly a repurposed food processing unit. And what exactly does it defend against? All manner of cosmic threats, Vexor declared, waving his tentacles with theatrical flourish. Asteroids, radiation, hostile craft, the Xorblatt. Right. The space bunnies, Hayes interrupted. Mind if I take a closer look at the control system? Before Vexor could object, Theo had already popped open an access panel, revealing a tangle of wires that would make any engineer weep. This is creative wiring, Theo managed diplomatically. You've connected the life support system to what appears to be your equivalent of a microwave oven. Redundant systems, Vexor squeaked. Very advanced concept. Very deadly concept, Theo corrected, carefully closing the panel. You're lucky this ship is still pressurized. As they continued their tour, it became increasingly clear that the supposedly fearsome alien vessel was held together with the extraterrestrial equivalent of duct tape and wishful thinking. The crew they encountered weren't military personnel but civilians, families, elderly aliens, even children, all pretending to be busy with official-looking tasks whenever the humans approached. During a moment when Vexor was distracted by what appeared to be a minor plumbing emergency, Dr. Washington pulled her colleagues aside. "These aren't conquerors," she whispered. "They're refugees. Look at the way they've modified living spaces to accommodate multiple families. The way they're stretching resources. They're running from something. Or someone." Hayes nodded grimly. "Question is, what scared them badly enough to try this desperate charade?" Their conversation was interrupted by a loud crash from an adjacent chamber, followed by sounds that required no translation to identify as panicked cursing. Vexor rushed ahead, tentacles flailing. "Nothing to concern yourselves with. Minor maintenance issue." The humans followed anyway, entering what appeared to be an engine room. A group of aliens were frantically trying to contain what looked like a small electrical fire while simultaneously attempting to hide it behind their bodies. "Is that your propulsion system?" Theo asked, pushing past the flustered aliens to examine the smoking machinery. "No, yes, it's undergoing scheduled maintenance," Vexor insisted, changing colors so rapidly he resembled a malfunctioning disco ball. Theo ignored him, already examining the damaged components with professional interest. After a moment he whistled low. "This is actually impressive engineering," he admitted. "Primitive by comparison to your other systems, but remarkably efficient given the constraints." "You understand our propulsion technology?" Vexor asked, his tone shifting from panic to genuine surprise. "Enough to see you've got a coolant leak," Theo nodded, pointing to a cracked component. "This regulator is shot, and you've been bypassing it with. Is that the alien equivalent of a garden hose?" "We improvise with available materials," one of the engineer aliens admitted sheepishly. "Mind if I take a closer look?" Theo asked, already rolling up his sleeves. The alien engineers exchanged uncertain glances, then moved aside. Theo spent several minutes examining the system, occasionally muttering technical observations to himself. Finally, he stepped back. "Your problem isn't just the coolant leak," he explained. "Your power distribution is completely unbalanced. You're channeling too much energy through secondary systems because your primary conduits are degraded." "We know," sighed one of the engineers, a weary-looking alien with faded blue coloration. "But replacement parts are impossible to find, and we lack the equipment to fabricate new components." Theo glanced at Hayes, who gave a small nod. "I might be able to help with that," he offered. "Earth may be a developing world by your standards, but we're pretty good at improvising fixes." While Theo conferred with the aliens about potential repairs, Dr. Washington had wandered into an adjacent chamber and froze at what she discovered. "General," she called, her voice carefully controlled. "You might want to see this." Hayes joined her, then stopped short. The large chamber wasn't part of the engine room or any military installation. It was a nursery, filled with what were unmistakably alien children, dozens of smaller versions of Krell's species, along with youngsters from several other alien races. They had been hastily hidden away when the inspection began, but curiosity had apparently gotten the better of them. One tiny alien, barely larger than a human toddler, floated up to Dr. Washington and extended a hesitant tentacle toward her hair. "Pretty," it said through a small translator device, its body glowing a gentle pink. Dr. Washington smiled, kneeling to the small creature's level. "Thank you. I like your colors too." Vexor had rushed in behind them, his panic now replaced with resignation. "Please," he said quietly, "do not harm the young ones. They are innocent in this deception." Hayes turned to the alien, her expression softening slightly. "We're not in the business of harming children of any species. Though we are very interested," Washington added, "in understanding why you have a nursery on what's supposed to be a diplomatic or military vessel." Vexor's colors dimmed to a sad blue. "This is not merely a vessel. It is all that remains of our colony world. These children were born here in space. They have never known a planet beneath their appendages." Hayes activated her comm link. "Murphy, you need to hear this." As she briefed Jack on their discoveries, Theo continued working with the alien engineers, who had dropped all pretense of superiority and were now eagerly accepting his suggestions. "If you reroute these connections," he explained, sketching a diagram on a datapad, "you could increase efficiency by at least 30%. And this material here, what do you call it?" Xorlium, provided one engineer. "Right, Xorlium. If you reconfigure its crystal structure using a targeted electromagnetic pulse, you might be able to repair the microfractures without replacing the entire component." The aliens stared at him, in what was clearly astonishment. "That is, we never considered." "How did you know this?" stammered the lead engineer. Theo shrugged. "It's similar to some experimental materials we've been developing on Earth. Different composition, but comparable properties. Basic engineering principles are pretty universal." By the time Hayes finished her call with Jack, Theo had assembled an impromptu workshop with the alien engineers, who were now treating him with something approaching reverence. "Doctor." Washington, meanwhile, had been adopted by a group of alien children who were teaching her what appeared to be an extraterrestrial version of pat a cake. "Murphy says to continue the inspection," Hayes informed them. "He's having an interesting conversation with Krell and wants all the information we can gather." "Tell him the ship is in terrible shape," Theo called over his shoulder, deep in technical discussion with his new alien colleagues. "Their life support systems are functioning at maybe 60% capacity, propulsion is barely holding together, and their power reserves are critically low. They couldn't threaten a small moon, let alone Earth." "And tell him," Washington added, allowing a small alien child to braid her hair with its tentacles, "that we're looking at multiple species, multiple generations. This isn't a military operation or even a diplomatic mission. It's a refugee crisis in space." Hayes nodded, relaying the information. After a moment, she received new instructions and turned back to Vexor, who had been hovering anxiously nearby. "Our leader has a proposition for you," she said. "He suggests we return to the conference room for a full and honest discussion about your situation." Vexor's colors shifted nervously. "Krell will not be pleased." "I think," Hayes replied dryly, "that Krell is past the point of maintaining this charade. Murphy says he's already started coming clean." As they prepared to return to Earth, Theo finished his impromptu engineering session with a final piece of advice. "When we get this all sorted out," he told the alien engineers, "I'd like to come back with proper tools and materials. There's a lot we could learn from each other." One of the engineers extended a tentacle in what Theo recognized as their version of a handshake. "You are not what we expected, human Theo Nakamura." "Yeah," Theo grinned, accepting the gelatinous appendage. "We get that a lot." Back at the UN conference room, Jack and Krell sat in uncomfortable silence, two diplomats whose carefully constructed narratives had collapsed like houses of cards. The alien's tentacles were curled inward, his once vibrant colors now a muted palette of resignation and embarrassment. So Jack finally broke the silence. "You're afraid of humans. Care to explain why an advanced spacefaring species is terrified of a civilization that still thinks rocket fuel is cutting-edge technology?" Krell's translator emitted a sound that might have been a sigh. "It is not what you are now that concerns us. It is what you will become." "That's cryptic," Jack replied. "Down our thoughts." "He's referring to predictive modeling," the AI suggested. "Many advanced civilizations use algorithmic forecasting to predict developmental trajectories of emerging species." "Your artificial intelligence is correct," Krell confirmed. "The Consortium's developmental trajectory division has studied thousands of species across the galaxy. Yours is unique. Uniquely terrifying," apparently Jack observed. "What exactly did your models predict?" Before Krell could answer, the conference room doors opened. General Hayes, Dr. Washington, and Theo entered, followed by a visibly deflated Vexor and two other aliens Jack hadn't met before. The inspection was illuminating. Hayes announced, taking a seat. Their ship is basically a flying refugee camp with cardboard weapons glued to the outside. They've got civilians of all ages aboard, Washington added, including children born in space who've never set foot on a planet. Theo dropped into a chair, grinning. Their technology is fascinating, advanced in some areas, primitive in others. Their propulsion system is particularly impressive, though badly maintained. With some Earth materials and expertise, we could help them make significant improvements. Jack turned back to Krell. It seems your protection fleet is in need of protection itself. Our shame is complete, Krell's translator intoned flatly. We are not conquerors or protectors. We are refugees, the last survivors of several colony worlds abandoned by the Consortium. Abandoned? Why? Jack pressed. Resource depletion, Krell admitted. The Consortium's expansion policies prioritized immediate extraction over sustainability. When a world could no longer provide sufficient resources, its colonies were reallocated. They left you to die, Hayes translated bluntly. Indeed, Krell's colors shifted to a somber gray. We were deemed non-essential personnel. Our evacuation ship was ancient, barely functional. We were expected to perish quietly. But you survived, Washington noted. And then came to Earth. After drifting for what you would call years, Krell confirmed. We encountered other abandoned colonies, other refugee ships. We combined our resources, our knowledge. We survived, but barely. And the protection racket? Jack asked. Exor's colors flushed with embarrassment. My strategy. I observed it in historical records of developing worlds. It seemed more dignified than begging. So you came to Earth pretending to be powerful protectors, Jack summarized, hoping to intimidate us into providing resources you desperately need. But what I still don't understand is why Earth specifically. And why are you afraid of us? The aliens exchanged glances, their colors rippling in what Dana identified as a silent communication pattern. Finally, Krell nodded and activated a small device. A holographic display appeared in the center of the table, showing Earth but not as it currently existed. This Earth was surrounded by a vast network of orbital structures, with ships moving between planets throughout the solar system. This is your world, Krell explained, approximately 200 of your years from now, according to our most conservative projections. The display shifted, showing human ships venturing beyond the solar system, establishing outposts on distant worlds. 500 years, Krell continued. Another shift, and now the display showed a vast network spreading across an entire galactic arm, with Earth at its center. 1,000 years, Krell said softly. No species in our database has ever expanded so rapidly, adapted so quickly, or shown such determination. You make it sound like we're a disease, Hayes frowned. Not a disease, Krell corrected. A force of nature. Your biological and sociological patterns are unique in our experience. Where other species reach equilibrium, you accelerate. Where others specialize, you diversify. Where others surrender to limitations, you overcome them. Jack studied the display thoughtfully. And this frightens you? It terrifies the entire consortium, Krell admitted. The predictive models suggest that within 2,000 years, humans will either dominate the galaxy or destroy themselves trying. There is no middle outcome. So the consortium decided to. What? Sabotage us early, Jack asked. Take our resources to slow our development. No, Krell's colors shifted to a deeper blue. The consortium abandoned this sector entirely. Your solar system has been designated a quarantine zone. No official consortium vessel will enter it. A stunned silence fell over the human delegation. Let me get this straight, Jack finally said. The mighty Galactic Consortium, which you claim controls a significant portion of the galaxy, is so afraid of what humans might become in a few centuries that they've written off our entire region of space. Precisely, Krell confirmed. Which is why we came here. I'm lost, Theo admitted. If everyone else is avoiding Earth like it's galactic poison ivy, why would you head straight for us? Because Vexor interjected, his colors brightening slightly. If the consortium fears you, then you are the one thing in the galaxy that the consortium fears, and we need protection from the consortium. Another silence fell as the humans processed this revelation. So Jack said slowly, you came to Earth pretending to offer us protection, when what you actually want is for us to protect you. The irony is not lost on us, Krell admitted. But our deception seemed necessary. We could not simply arrive and announce ourselves as fugitives seeking sanctuary from the very power we claim to represent. Why not? Dr. Washington asked. Humans have a long history of providing refuge to those fleeing persecution. We did not know this, Krell replied. Our information on human culture is limited and somewhat contradictory. You were afraid we'd either turn you away or blast you out of the sky, Hayes surmised. Both seemed equally possible based on our data. Vexor confirmed. Human entertainment broadcasts are confusing. In some you welcome aliens with open appendages. In others you shoot them on sight. Jack couldn't help chuckling. You've been watching our movies and thinking they're documentaries. Haven't you? The alien's embarrassed color shifts were answer enough. Okay, Jack leaned back, processing everything. Let me make sure I understand the situation correctly. You're refugees abandoned by this consortium, which is afraid of what humans might become. You came to Earth hoping to scam us out of resources to survive, but what you actually need is asylum, a safe place for your people to live without fear of the consortium finding you. That is accurate, Krell admitted. Though we prefer strategic misrepresentation to scam potato, Jack shrugged. The question now is, what do we do about it? General Hayes leaned forward. Murphy, these aliens have intentionally deceived us, attempted to extort our resources under false pretenses, and frankly their story about the consortium fearing humanity sounds suspiciously convenient. All true, Jack acknowledged. But they've also got children aboard that ship. Their resources are critically low, and they're clearly desperate. Plus, their technology, even in its current condition, could significantly advance our own. The propulsion system alone would revolutionize our space program, Theo added eagerly. And their life support technology could have immediate applications on Earth. Dr. Washington nodded. And from a scientific perspective, the opportunity to study multiple alien species and cultures is unprecedented. Jack turned back to Krell. Before we decide anything, I need to know, are there any other surprises waiting? Any other strategic misrepresentations we should know about? Krell's colors shifted through several patterns before settling on a steady blue. We have revealed our true situation. We are refugees seeking sanctuary, nothing more. And the consortium. Is there any chance they'll come looking for you? Unlikely, Krell replied. We are considered expendable. And as I explained, this entire sector is quarantined due to humanity's presence. So we frighten away the very threat you need protection from, Jack mused. Convenient, not convenience, Krell corrected. Strategy. Why do you think we chose Earth specifically? Jack leaned back, studying the alien with new appreciation. Because we're your perfect shield. The consortium won't follow you here because they're afraid of us, even though we're centuries away from being the threat they fear. Precisely, Krell confirmed. We merely need to survive until your civilization advances enough to definitively secure this region of space. Jack exchanged glances with his team. Well, that's certainly the most backhanded compliment I've ever received. You're terrifying. Can we hide behind you? Dana chimed in through Jack's earpiece. Technically, they're asking for exactly what they originally offered: protection. Just with the roles reversed. And with honesty this time, Jack muttered. He stood up, addressing both the human and alien delegations. I think we need to take this to our respective leadership. This is bigger than anyone in this room can decide alone. What will you recommend? Krell asked, his tentacles quivering slightly. Jack considered the question carefully. That depends, he finally said. Are you willing to be completely honest with our leaders about everything: your situation, your technologies, your knowledge of the wider galaxy? We have little choice, Krell replied. But yes then, Jack said with a small smile, I think humanity might just live up to its terrifying potential a few centuries early. 3 days later, Jack stood at the observation window of the International Space Station, watching Earth rotate slowly beneath him. The blue-green planet looked deceptively peaceful from orbit, no hint of the diplomatic firestorm that had erupted following the revelation of actual aliens seeking asylum. Penny, for your thoughts, came Dr. Washington's voice as she floated up beside him. Just contemplating how quickly life can get weird, Jack replied. A week ago, my biggest concern was whether to get Thai or Italian for dinner. Now I'm negotiating interspecies refugee policies with a group of tentacled aliens who think we're the scariest thing in the galaxy. Life comes at you fast, Washington agreed, securing herself to a handrail, especially when it's extraterrestrial life. The ISS had been hastily converted into a neutral meeting ground, easier than bringing the alien leadership to Earth or squeezing more humans onto their overcrowded vessel. Various modules now housed a mix of human officials and alien representatives, all working frantically to hammer out an unprecedented agreement. "How's Theo doing with the engineering exchange?" Jack asked. Washington chuckled. "Last I checked, he was practically vibrating with excitement. The aliens gave him access to their technical database as a show of good faith. He says he hasn't slept in 48 hours and doesn't plan to start anytime soon. And General Hayes still suspicious but coming around. The security protocols she's designing are impressive, protecting both us from them and them from us. Turns out military minds can be surprisingly diplomatic when aliens are involved." Their conversation was interrupted by Dana's voice in Jack's ear. "Incoming call from the Secretary General. The alien delegation is assembled in Module C." Showtime, Jack sighed, pushing off from the window. "Ready to make history?" Born ready, Washington grinned. "Though I never imagined it would involve space refugees who think we're the galactic boogeyman." Module C had been transformed into an impromptu conference room. On one side sat Earth's hastily assembled Alien Affairs Committee representatives from major world powers, scientific institutions, and military organizations. On the other side perched the alien delegation, led by Krell, whose colors had stabilized into a cautiously optimistic pattern of blues and greens. Between them, holographic displays showed the leaders who couldn't be physically present: the UN Secretary General, several heads of state, and via a secure link to their vessel, the full Alien Council representing the various refugee species. "Let us begin," the Secretary General announced once everyone had settled. "After 3 days of intense discussions, we believe we have reached a framework for an unprecedented agreement between humanity and our unexpected visitors." Jack stood, taking his position at the center of the room. As lead negotiator, it fell to him to present the proposal they'd spent 72 sleepless hours crafting. "What we're proposing," he began, "is not simply asylum for the refugees, but a mutually beneficial alliance. Earth will provide a sanctuary for the alien refugees, along with resources necessary for their survival. In exchange, they will share appropriate technologies and knowledge to help accelerate Earth's development, specifically in areas that will allow us to better protect both ourselves and them." Krell's translator emitted a sound that might have been a thoughtful hum. "And the terms of this knowledge exchange," Theo Nakamura, who had finally been convinced to take a shower and change clothes, activated a detailed schematic. "We're proposing a phased technology transfer, beginning with non-military applications: medical technology, sustainable energy, water purification, and agricultural advancements that would benefit both our peoples. These technologies would help address critical needs on Earth," Jack explained, "while also providing better support for your refugee population. Subsequent phases would include space propulsion, advanced materials, and eventually defensive systems, but implemented gradually to ensure stability." "And our residents?" asked one of the other alien representatives, a crystalline being that communicated through patterns of light. Dr. Washington activated another display, showing Earth's moon. "We're proposing the establishment of a joint colony on the far side of our moon, outside the public view but close enough for regular supply missions and communication. As trust builds and humanity becomes more accustomed to the reality of alien life, we can discuss more integrated arrangements." A moon-based Vexor's colors brightened with something like hope. "Our young could finally feel solid ground beneath them." General Hayes stepped forward, her expression serious. "There are, of course, security protocols to discuss. While we're offering sanctuary, we need assurances that Earth's safety remains paramount." "Understandable," Krell acknowledged. "We have prepared comprehensive data on our refugee population capabilities and needs. We have no desire to threaten the very world we seek protection from." One of the human diplomats, a skeptical-looking woman representing a coalition of smaller nations, leaned forward. "And what happens when this consortium discovers you're here? Are we inviting an interstellar war to our doorstep?" Krell's colors rippled thoughtfully. "The consortium's fear of humanity is both our greatest protection and yours. They will not venture into this system willingly. By the time they might reconsider, your technological development accelerated by our knowledge would make any hostile action unwise. So we're betting our planet's safety on the consortium remaining afraid of our potential," the diplomat pressed. "Not exactly," Jack interjected. "We're creating a mutually beneficial situation where advancing our capabilities serves both our interests and the refugees. If the consortium ever did decide to investigate, they'd find a much more advanced Earth than their models predicted." The Secretary General's hologram nodded. Which brings us to perhaps the most important aspect of this agreement: how do we prevent exploitation on either side? How do we ensure this partnership remains balanced? Through transparency and oversight, Jack replied. We're proposing a joint governance council for the lunar colony, with equal representation from Earth and the refugee community. All technology transfers, resource allocations, and policy decisions would require approval from both sides. Hours passed as they debated the finer points of the agreement. Energy reserves, communication protocols, medical exchange programs, cultural integration frameworks, each item meticulously dissected and reconstructed until both sides could accept the terms. Finally, as Earth completed another rotation beneath them, the Secretary General called for a decision. We have before us an unprecedented opportunity, she said, her holographic gaze moving from human to alien and back again. Not simply to provide sanctuary to those in need, but to accelerate humanity's development and place in the galaxy. Are we prepared to take this step, one by one? The human representatives signaled their agreement. The alien council did the same, their various appendages, light patterns, and color shifts indicating assent in species-specific ways. Then it is decided, the Secretary General declared. Operation Lunar Sanctuary will begin immediately. After the formal session concluded, Jack found himself again at the observation window, joined this time by Krell. The alien's tentacles moved in gentle waves as he gazed down at Earth. Your world is beautiful, Krell observed. More vibrant than the consortium's records suggested it has its moments, Jack agreed. Though I imagine it looks different through your eyes or whatever sensory organs you use. Indeed. I perceive thermal patterns and biochemical signatures your eyes cannot see. The living energy of your world is breathtaking. They floated in companionable silence for a moment. May I ask a personal question, Krell finally said. Sure, the consortium's models predict humanity will either dominate the galaxy or destroy yourselves trying. Having met your species, what do you believe the outcome will be? Jack considered the question carefully. Honestly, neither. I think the models are missing something fundamental about humans, which is... We're contrary by nature, Jack smiled. Tell us we can't do something, we'll find a way. Tell us we're destined to rule everything, we'll rebel against that too. Our history is full of people looking at predetermined paths and saying, no thanks, I'll make my own. Krell's colors shifted in what Dana identified as thoughtful amusement. So you believe humans will neither conquer nor collapse, but find some third option the models cannot predict. That's what we do best, Jack shrugged. Defy expectations. 6 months later, Jack stood on the lunar surface outside the newly established colony, now officially named Sanctuary Base. The Earth hung in the black sky, a blue-green beacon of the improbable home he'd left behind. Beside him stood Krell, whose environmental suit had been specially designed to accommodate his unique physiology. Around them, a flurry of activity filled the lunar landscape. Human engineers and alien technicians working side by side to expand the base, shuttles arriving with supplies, and in the distance, the framework of the first permanent alien settlement taking shape. The consortium's latest communication was intercepted yesterday, Krell said, his translator now integrated into his suit. They've increased the quarantine zone around your solar system. Apparently their long-range sensors detected anomalous technological advancement on your moon. Jack laughed. Well, they're not wrong indeed. Their predictive models are now in complete disarray. Some analysts are suggesting humanity might reach interstellar capability within decades rather than centuries. Are they scared? Terrified, Krell confirmed, his colors shifting to an amused blue visible through his suit's transparent sections. But also fascinated. There's a growing faction within the consortium arguing for cautious observation rather than complete avoidance. Progress, Jack nodded. They watched as a group of alien children, the first generation to know life on a solid celestial body, played in the lunar gravity alongside human children from the scientific families now stationed at the base. Their laughter came through the communication system, a universal sound of joy that needed no translation. You know what the real irony is, Jack mused. What's that? The consortium feared humanity would one day dominate the galaxy through conquest or competition. But if we ever do spread throughout the stars, it'll be through cooperation. Working with your people has advanced our technology, yes, but it's also expanded our perspective. Krell's tentacles moved in a pattern that Jack had come to recognize as philosophical agreement. Perhaps that is the flaw in the consortium's modeling. They calculated technological advancement, resource utilization, Biological adaptation, but they failed to account for something far less quantifiable. Friendship, Jack suggested with a wry smile. I was going to say mutually beneficial cooperation, Krell replied. But yes, essentially their conversation was interrupted by Theo's excited voice over the comm system. Jack. Krell. You need to see this. We just got the propulsion lab online, and the first tests of the hybrid drive are exceeding all projections. Duty calls, Jack sighed, turning toward the base. Ready to go make the consortium's nightmares come true with pleasure, Krell replied, his colors shifting to an enthusiastic purple. Though I suspect the reality will be far more interesting than anything they predicted. As they walked back toward the base, a message arrived from Earth. It was from Dana, who had been upgraded with alien quantum processing techniques and now coordinated communications between the two worlds. Thought you'd want to know, her message read. The UN just announced the formation of the Earth Sanctuary Joint Space Initiative. First mission objective, a proper exploration vessel. They're calling it Unexpected Friendship. Figured you'd appreciate the irony. Jack smiled, sharing the message with Krell. Well, he said, I guess that answers the consortium's question about humanity's future in the galaxy. How so? Krell asked. They thought we'd either dominate everything or destroy ourselves trying, Jack replied as they reached the airlock. But it looks like we're taking a third option, making friends with the neighborhood, a typically human solution, Krell observed, his colors shifting to a pattern that needed no translation at all. Yeah, Jack agreed, looking back at the Earth hanging in the black sky. When someone offers you protection and asks for your resources, the standard galactic response is apparently to either submit or fight back. And the human response, Jack grinned as the airlock began to cycle. Ask protection from what and then protect each other instead.